Advanced strategies. There are many more factors you need to consider in order to run the perfect split test, other than merely the length of the trial. For example, where are your viewers coming from? How are they matched? To return to our metaphor of the scientific study, this is the same as ensuring that the samples are matched. In studies, it's always important to make sure that the participants in Group A are as similar to the participants in Group B as possible. So, what's wrong with the method we're currently using? Well, if you use the redirect method described earlier in this training, then you'll essentially be sending visitors to one of two websites based on completely random chance. It's effectively a coin toss. This means that while you should get 50% of your visitors to use each page, those visitors won't necessarily be matched in any way. Pure chance might mean that everyone from Asia ends up on one version of your website, while everyone from the US ends up on another. This can skew your results again, owing to cultural differences. Similarly, time zone, type of device, and much more can all also have an impact. Thankfully, a little simple PHP code will allow you to get around this problem. You can easily query the time of day, the user's location, or the type of device they are using, and then use that to keep track of who is being sent where. This is a slightly more complex coding challenge, as you will need to keep a log of who has gone to which version of the page, but a developer or the right tool should be able to set this up for you. The lazy version. If you are using a redirect to test the two versions of your website, then you will likely be considering making the changes permanent should they prove effective. To do that, you're probably planning on taking the changes you made to your experimental pages and then editing the original page once you've removed the redirect. There is another way, though, which may be quicker. This is to take the edited version and simply make the redirect permanent. You can do this with a redirect, but note that by using a 301 redirect from your htaccess file, you will risk losing 10% of your link equity. To prevent this from happening, use a JavaScript or PHP redirect instead. Split testing for sales pages. Split testing can be used for more than SEO purposes. One example of this is using split testing in order to assess the conversion rates of a sales page. So what does that mean, and why is split testing the perfect fit? Essentially, a sales page is a single page on a website that is designed to sell a product. Normally, this works by providing a whole lot of text, often in a vertical pillar, that explains the virtues of the product and that slowly reels the reader in until they are overcome with the urge to click buy. Often, the product in question will be a digital product owned by the site owner, or perhaps an affiliate product that they are selling for commission. Either way, this creates an extremely simple business model: find or create the product, create a website selling the product, then send people to your page by directing traffic that way. The only factor here that will determine your success one way or the other is the conversion rate. What percentage of people who visit your site end up clicking on your Buy Now button and placing an order? This crucial factor determines your profits. If you pay for every visitor to your site, then you need to make sure that on average, every visitor is going to earn you more than they cost you. If you pay 30 cents per visitor and you have 100 visitors with a product that gets you $15, then you need a conversion rate of 0.5% in order to break even. 50 visitors will cost you $15, so as long as one of them buys something from you, you're good. The conversion rate of your site is highly dependent on the product, on the way you design and target your ads, but also, of course, on just how persuasive your landing page is. A single well-placed image on your site could help grab to attention more quickly than a bulk of text and could thereby increase your conversion rate significantly. That one change could make the whole operation profitable. Or, of course, it could hurt your sales and drive people away who don't want to have to scroll past a big image. How can you know which one works? Simple, by conducting a split test. Split testing for ads. As mentioned, when you are trying to sell products via a sales page, the ads you create are just as important as the sales page itself. In other words, you need to make sure that when someone lands on your page, they are going to find something that interests them. A good ad not only brings in a lot of visitors, but also brings in the right kinds of visitors. So how do you go about choosing the perfect audience, design, and title for your ad? One answer is to use something called AdWords experiments, which are offered by Google itself by default. This way, you can test which combination of factors works best and thereby hone the ideal sales funnel. 3- and 4-way tests. While a split test is generally a test that compares two different versions of a website, there is actually no reason not to try comparing more than two different options. Create a host of different web pages, all with slight tweaks, and then see which one performs best. This actually works particularly well if you're using a redirect to measure something like conversion rates, but it can also work using the matched pages approach. In theory, this can help you save a lot of time, though it can, of course, also make the whole process a fair bit more complicated. The technical bit, using redirects. As mentioned, the big problem with the method described in the previous video is that it doesn't allow you to control for every single confounding variable. While you might run lots of tests with very similar pages, they are still different pages, and they might still succeed or fail based on other factors. While you can use larger groups to minimize this effect, it's still ultimately going to mean basing your decisions on estimated guesses. And there are limits to just how many pages you can use in a split A/B test. If you're going to be changing the results across hundreds of pages on your site, then this will involve a lot of work. What's more is that you will be potentially hurting your site in a big way if the change proves to be a mistake. The whole point of A/B testing is to conduct the experiment in a controlled manner. So what can you do? One answer is to use a redirect, which has different and unique pros and cons. A redirect simply means that you're going to send visitors to a different version of the website. This will use a number of different methods, more in a moment, but one of the simplest is the HTML redirect. The browser will read this code and will then follow it to the new page. If you use this method, then as soon as a visitor lands on a web page, there will be a short pause and then they will be sent to the new web page. Of course, this version of a split test also has its limitations. After all, there's no way for Google to alter its ranking depending on which page performs best. That's because the two versions of the page are one and the same as far as Google is concerned, meaning that they will only rank once depending on which version Google took into account. So how can this be used to monitor your SEO performance? This is useful for measuring a host of factors that will impact on your SEO. That means things like bounce rates, things like CTR, click-through rate, and more. While this might not directly affect your ranking, seeing what page design or content is best for audience retention will have a big effect on your ranking, so this can be just as useful. Which type should you use? The answer is, of course, both, if you have the time. The more data you collect, the smarter decisions your business will make, and the more likely you are to see performance boosts. Better redirects. The redirect used above will work as described to send a user directly to a different website. This way, they can experience a temporary alternative to your main page without hurting the appearance of that page. Of course, what we really want to do, though, is to ensure that the page only loads for half of the visitors. That's where we need to get a little savvier. What's more is that we want Google to get sent to the new page as well. As it is, 100% of our visitors are being sent to the new page, and Google spiders will recognize that the page is a redirect and not a regular page. So why would it rank as normal? Instead, you'd be better off using a PHP redirect. PHP stands for PHP Hypertext Preprocessor. And yes, that means that it has its own name in the acronym, which is extremely confusing. PHP is a form of scripting language that runs on the server rather than in the browser. Your website is stored on a server somewhere, which is essentially a large computer, and the HTML code is then sent to and interpreted by a browser each time someone types in the correct URL. Because PHP runs on the server, that means that it runs before the browser ever sees it. In turn, that means that the page will appear in the browser fully formed. You can redirect in PHP by creating a PHP file with the name of your page and then inserting the following text. This will now redirect visitors to the new location, and it will do so in a way that is impossible for anyone to detect. Even if they were to view source, the source they'd see would be the HTML for the new page. The next thing we need to do is to ensure that only half of the visitors are sent to the new page, and we can do this by randomly redirecting those visitors. What this does is to choose a random number between 1 and 2, and if the number is 1, then it sends the visitor to the new page. If not, they stay where they are. This works by using a timer to choose the number, hence the need for the micro-time part. You don't really need to know how this works, though, only that it does work. Using include. While this method of redirecting visitors can be effective, it still isn't quite perfect. You still have two different types of web pages, which could potentially confuse results. The URL in the address bar will be different, for example, which could result in action from Google, more on this in a bit, and which could confuse your users. Another option then is to use an include file. This basically means that the page will populate itself with content from another page, allowing a blank template to become your new version of the page. In this version, you will create 2 HTML pages that only contain the elements that are different. This works particularly well if you are changing something about the text, for instance. Save these as version 1.htm and version 2.html. Then use the following code on the main page. Place this where on your page you want the difference to show. Of course, this becomes a little harder to track, and it won't be suitable for every single option. But you can always create 2 full-page include files and have them load instead. Finally, you can also include what is known as a 301 direct, which you'll achieve by using your htaccess file available through your file manager. Just open it up and add the line. As you can see, there are plenty of options, but by understanding how redirects work and how to use them if you should decide to, you'll be able to employ the full range of strategies. More use for redirects. There are more ways that redirects can be useful and more reasons that you should familiarize yourself with the technique. For example, this is also by far the most useful option for measuring other metrics, such as your conversions and your profits if you have a sales page, for example. In other words, if it's not ranking that you're testing for, then you can happily use the redirect method and then see whether this impacts on the way that users engage with your site. We'll talk more about this later in the training. Redirects using the include method can also be a better way to run the matched pages test. Rather than manually change half of the pages on your site, or a large bunch of pages in your experimental group, you can use the include file in order to make the change once and then insert it into half the pages on your site. That in turn means you'll be able to quickly reverse your efforts as well, or even run entirely new tests by changing text in just one document. Finally, a redirect can be a useful way of testing changes using the previous method, but without permanently altering your site. Using split testing for SEO success. The practical guide. Okay, that's enough theory for a bit. It's time to get practical. How do you go about running a split test and seeing how it impacts on your SEO? There are a couple of different ways. In this video, we're going to look at 2 of the most common, creating 2 different versions of a web page versus creating one page that loads differently for different users. We'll look at how this works and at which one is best for you. In this video, we will first of all discuss the most common method, which is to use different pages on the same website. 2 different web pages. The first option is to compare 2 slightly different web pages that employ different SEO strategies, keeping everything else as close to equal as possible. More accurately, you will compare 2 groups of different pages. Comparing 2 versions of the same page can work, but it's rife with difficulty. Let's say, for example, that you have a web page all about how to train your Labrador and a web page all about how to train your Golden Retriever. These pages are almost identical in subject matter, and you're going to go out of your way to ensure they are extremely similar in all other ways that count, too. You'll ensure they have the same number of links pointing to them, that they are equally prominent on your site, that they are the same length, that they have the same number of headings, etc. From here, you can then go about making small changes to a few of the matched pages and see if this boosts or hurts traffic. You'll then watch the difference in your stats, making sure to collect as much data as possible. Repeat this a few times with different matched pages, and once you are sure that your new SEO strategy works, introduce it to the rest of your content. Challenges. Of course, this option is not perfect. In case you hadn't already figured it out, one big issue is that both versions of the page are targeting different keywords or competing for the same ones, which massively skews your results. Different keywords will include different competition, different related terms, and more. All of this means that you are never comparing like for like. And if you try and create 2 pages that compete for the same keyword, then you could end up running afoul of one of Google's most recent algorithm updates, the diversity update. This update is aimed at ensuring that most SERPs don't display multiple results for the same site, thereby meaning that you won't have a fair fight on your hands. You can create 2 pages targeting the same keywords and see which one wins, but even then, you are changing the results simply by having competition exist provided by you. You could always create 2 pages the exact same, but this is inadvisable for a number of reasons. Firstly, Google will see a precise duplicate page as being worthless and might even penalize the page. Google doesn't want its users to repeatedly stumble upon the same content, and so it won't rank it. If these pages are hosted on separate domains, which introduces more complex factors such as domain age, then Google might see one page as having violated the copyright of the other and the entire site could be severely penalized. Then there's the fact that having more than one page with the same content is confusing for viewers and could lose you the trust of your readers. The optimal answer to this is to use different pages, but to make sure that you target extremely similar keywords. Use a keyword research tool like KW Finder, www.kwfinder.com, and then target keywords that have similar search volumes and similar KD, keyword difficulty ratings. When you do this, you can try different techniques on similar pages with similar objectives and see which one comes out on top. Another option is to look at two pages that rank identically, and then try making the change to one of those pages and see how it is affected. This is a slightly better strategy because you are starting from a similar place. What's more is that you can open up your stats and then use the historical data in order to make a forecast of how the web pages should have behaved. If one page was moving in a certain direction and that direction sped up, slowed down, or reversed, then it might be the result of the changes you made, especially if the matched page did not show the same changes. Again, the different difficulty of different keywords, the amount of competition, etc., can all impact on your results and potentially skew your findings. But while this might be seen as a problem, it can be mitigated somewhat by simply using as many pages as possible in your test. In other words, instead of taking two similar web pages and comparing their success where one has been changed, you instead take two groups of pages and make the changes to some of them while leaving the others as they are. Again, it's possible that by sheer coincidence, multiple pages will perform better than others beginning from that point. But that's when you use the statistical significance tests, compared the new and the old ranking positions of those in Group A to those in Group B, and then find out if the data suggests an effect. This is the main technique that this training will be recommending for carrying out split tests, and we'll call it the matched pages method, tools and best practices. While you have a good idea of how to utilize several different split test strategies at this point, you may not be quite ready to start putting them into action. There are some key points to keep in mind in order to avoid running into trouble, and some additional methods and tools that can help you get an edge. You'll find all that in this video. How to avoid negative consequences from redirects. While split testing can be a fantastic way to measure the performance of various versions of a site, it does come with a couple of potential dangers. In particular, using the redirect method can risk harming your SEO. Google has officially stated that it has no problem with either split tests or with redirects. In fact, redirects are commonly used in a variety of other scenarios. They are necessary for many e-commerce tools, for example, and also used to mask URLs for affiliate marketers. But redirects can also be used maliciously, and it's here that the problems come in. Cloaking is a technique used by some developers in order to effectively trick users into going to a different page. So for example, you might create a website that provides free, valuable fitness information. Over time, you build that site to be highly successful, and you begin to rank in the top for how to lose weight. Nice. But rather than be happy with that and monetize it in an honest and fair way, you instead decide to use a redirect to start sending all your visitors to an affiliate product and raking in the cash. It's an obvious strategy, but one that Google can have a hard time spotting if you use a PHP redirect. Of course, Google does usually cotton on, and at that point you will see your page and probably your entire website de-indexed. This is what Google doesn't want to see. Then there is the inherent danger of having two versions of the same site. Google might see this as spammy, it might see this as confusing, whatever, it could hurt your ranking. So what do? One option is to use the canonical link attribute on all of your experimental pages and to point this towards your original page. This tells Google's robots which page is the original, and that ensures that it will understand what's going on and see that you're not trying anything fishy. Don't be tempted to block Google's robots from viewing your experimental pages. This can actually end up hurting your ranking as well. Finally, keep in mind the impact that page load times can have on your ranking. Page load times are one of the key factors Google now looks for when determining the ranking of a site, and if your load time is very slow, then it will hurt your position. A redirect can significantly slow things down, which is again why a PHP redirect or htaccess redirect is preferable to an HTML one. You should also consider this factor when looking at other tools that run split test. Using a developer. Is all of this sounding a little complicated at this point? And don't worry. For the vast majority of business owners, the best option will be simply to use the matched pages test. Take two groups of pages, make a few changes to one, and then monitor their performance over time. Use forecasts for their behavior, and see which pages outperform their predictions and which don't. If you want to check for significance, then you can run a chi test. If you still find that notion a little confusing and you don't know how to do things like tracking the position of your website on Google, or if you want to get more advanced by comparing pages using a redirect, then you have another option: hire a developer or a marketer to handle the process for you. This can simplify the entire process and is advisable for any business that isn't familiar with the intricacies of SEO and code. The single most important tip. Before we go any further, it's time that we share the single most important tip regarding split testing. Always back up. Whether you choose to use a developer or to handle all this yourself, making different versions of your web pages can introduce risk. This is especially true when using the include method or others that actually alter the content on the original version of the page. So, make sure that you back up your site regularly and that you especially back up any pages you'll be tweaking. Tools for split testing. Tracking. In order for split testing to work effectively, you of course need an accurate way of tracking performance. To that end, it's a good idea to invest in some high-quality keyword tracking software that can show you your position in the SERPs for particular terms. You'll then be able to use these tools to compare how your site is performing after the changes to how it performed before the changes. While there are plenty of great tools out there, two great examples include SEMrush, www.semrush.com, which is one of the most expensive but feature-rich SEO tools on the market, and SERP Watcher from Mangools, www.serpwatcher.com, which is a more affordable but generally no less effective alternative. Google Analytics. Google Analytics won't track your position in the SERPs, but can show you a huge range of different factors relating to your site's performance. These include things such as CTR, bounce rates, and more. You can view this information as trends over time, or you can see it displayed on a per-day basis. You can even track individual visitors, thereby seeing how someone who comes from a certain link behaves on your site versus another. This would, in theory, allow you to create lots of different split tests on the fly, simply by dividing your data into categories and comparing. Setting up Google Analytics is fortunately very simple. You'll need to place a small tracking code on each page of your site, which you can get from Google. You can do this manually or use a plugin or developer to handle it for you. Once you've done that, you'll need to wait for 24 hours. This gives Google long enough to collect some basic data, which can then be used however you wish. You'll choose to set up a view, which will be called a lens and will include the stats you're interested in at that time. Other examples of tracking tools include Jetpack Web Stats for WordPress, and you can find many others built in with hosting packages. Optimizely and ODN. ODN, https://odn.distill.net, is the optimized delivery network from a company called Distilled. This is a tool that allows you to much more easily utilize split testing for your site by grouping different versions of web pages. You'll first deploy the system in front of your website and will then interact with a CMS in order to group your pages and make minor differences that you hope to impact positively on your ranking. ODN makes it much simpler to measure how changes impact on your SEO, but keep in mind that this tool in particular will aim to change 50% of the pages on your site. As we have discussed previously, this might actually be a little more than is optimal for most applications. That said, ODN is one of the best options for those that want to get started with split testing but don't want to tinker with their own website or hire a developer. If you are measuring something other than ranking, such as the time spent on a website, conversion rates, or anything else, then another great option is called Optimizely, www.optimizely.com. Optimizely will work by using the redirect method, but won't hurt your rankings thanks to the canonical tag and the fast redirect speeds. Neither of these tools are free, but in theory, they can pay for themselves. If you're interested in split testing and want to make your life as simple as possible, then try them out.